Hello everyone, Zeno here. Here to bring part 5 of What If Team RWBY were teleported into Red vs Blue. Link down description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 9, Grimm Encounters. Ruby, Church said. What are? Shish, Ruby said, stopping Church from speaking. The Grimm were just staring at them for now. A few Beowulfs and Ursai circled the group, emitting low growls. But most of them did not make any moves. No one make any loud noise, Yang whispered. These creatures are very dangerous and will not hesitate to kill us, Weiss whispered as well. What do we do? Simmons whispered, a tone of fear in his voice. No, don't be afraid, Blake whispered. They can sense that, and they will attack. Everyone just calm down, Ruby said. As long as no one shows any fear, or panic, we'll be. Hey, what was that bright light? They all turned to Caboose, who spoke up very loudly. What? Is there something in my face? Caboose said. He then looked towards the Grimm. Oh my god, what are those scary things? Fine, Ruby finished her now futile statement. At Caboose's loud yell, plus the fear and panic in his words, the Grimm surrounding them roared as they became agitated from the negative emotions they sensed. As soon as the Grimm roared, Tex made her move. She pulled out several grenades, removed their pins and threw them around and towards the Grimm. The explosion caused the Grimm to back away, dispersing the circle they made around them. Run! Tex shouted. The Reds and Blues began to scatter. Specifically, Church, Tucker, Simmons, and Griff began to make a run for it to Blue Base. Caboose just started to run around in no particular direction while screaming. This left Tex, Sarge, and Team RWBY and the Grimm, who were beginning to recover from the explosion. Well, looks like that just leaves you and me Tex, Sarge said. Yeah, I think it would be better if you leave too, Tex said. I can take care of myself. And miss out on the big fight, Sarge said. Not a chance. He cocked his shotgun and began to run forward. Today is a good day to die. However, as he began to fire his shotgun, he quickly saw that it was having no effect on the Grimm. As Sarge got closer to the Grimm, a Beowulf ran towards him and swiped him aside, knocking him several feet away. Tex just shook her head at Sarge's brash strategy. She then turned to Team RWBY. You four get out of here now. But we can help. Ruby protested. I can't fight whatever these things are while babysitting you, now get. Tex didn't manage to finish her sentence as several Ursa began to charge at her. Tex pulled out her gun and began to fire at them, but to no effect. She kept her gun and went into a fighting stance, getting ready to fight with her fists. However, she didn't get the chance as Blake grabbed her from behind. Blake quickly used her semblance, creating clones of herself and Tex and pulled the two of them back as the Ursa charged at the clones, which dissipated as soon the Ursa attacked them. Blake pulled Tex back with the rest of her team. Tex was surprised by Blake's rescue, and even more surprised at how Blake saved her. Her body felt strange for a second, then she was with Blake and her team. How the hell did you? Explanations later. Weiss shouted. Yeah, Yang said. What now, sis? You three help the Church and the others, Ruby said. I'm going to get Sarge. Using her semblance, she dashed to the fallen Sarge. You heard her, Yang said. Let's save the idiots. Back in Blue Base, things were not looking good. Doc, open the door now. Church shouted as he continued to bang his fist on the base door. I would if I could, Church. But I can't, Doc said. I was in here with Sister giving her a physical examination, when the power went out all of a sudden and I can't get the doors open. What? Church shouted, realizing that using their teleporter with the dust core must have drained the power from the base. Oh come on. Hey, are you hungry or something? Doc asked. Because I hear a lot of loud growling. Church turned around to see several Grimm had followed them and were beginning to surround the base, and them. Oh shit. What do we do? Simmons said, panicking. Maybe we can distract by feeding them Griff, Tucker suggested. He's pretty fat. Hey, Griff yelled. No, Griff's too disgusting, Simmons said. They'll probably throw him up. Thank you, Griff said. Guys, focus, Church said. We're about to die. They saw the Grimm slowly closing in on them. Church, Tucker said. I just want to say. I know Tucker, Church said. I hate you too. Griff, Simmons said. I just want to say. Shut up, Griff said. Let's just die in silence. The Grimm then charged at them. However, instead of getting mauled, a trail of ice protruded from the ground, freezing the Grimm and stopping them in their tracks. The Reds and Blues looked to where the trail came from and saw Weiss, her rapier thrust into the ground. What the hell did you do? Tucker said, astonished by what Weiss did. Quit gawking and step back, Weiss said. They did as she instructed. In an instant, the heads of the Grimms trapped in the ice were cut off. They saw a kusarigama-like weapon with a ribbon attached pulled back, to be caught by Blake. Yang was there as well with Tex, her arms slung over Yang. Tex, Church said, concerned. What happened? Are you alright? I'll live, Tex said. I just got surprised, that's all. That you got saved by a bunch of kids, Yang said. Yeah, don't rub it in, Tex said. Here, Yang gave Tex to Church. Guys, Simmons said. They all saw that more Grimm began heading their way. You guys stay here, Blake said, changing Gamble Shroud from gun mode to katana mode. We'll handle these guys. Handle them, Griff exclaimed. How? Relax Griff, Yang said. She then activated Ember Celica, her bracelets becoming gauntlets that covered her hands and forearms. We do this for a living. You what? Simmons shouted in surprise. You're just kids, Tucker said. What kind of kids fight monsters for a living? Church asked, taken by surprise with how these girls were acting towards these monsters. HMPH, we're huntresses. It's what we do, Weiss said, raising Myrtanaster forward. Let's go. The three of them rushed towards to oncoming Grimm. Who are these girls? Church said. After dodging some Grimm, Ruby made it to Sarge. Sarge, are you okay? Ruby asked, shaking the fallen soldier. Dang it Ruby, you ruined my plan, Sarge said, apparently awake and conscious. What? Ruby said, confused. My plan to lure those things to me by pretending to be knocked out, Sarge explained. Then, when they try to eat supposedly vulnerable me, blammo. I take him out. Sarge, your weapons don't work on them, Ruby tried to explain. Nonsense, Sarge said. The clear problem is distance, so if I get them close enough, they're gonna meet the end of my shotgun. As if on cue, several Beowulfs were heading their way. Stand back, Ruby, Sarge said as he stepped forward. It's time for these monsters to get Sar. Sarge failed to finish his sentence as Ruby stepped in front of him. Ruby pulled out Crescent Rose and unfolded it into its scythe mode. She then planted the blade onto ground and began to fire several shots at the approaching Grimm, taking them out one by one, unloading bullets with each shot. She then turned to Sarge. Run to blue base, now. Sarge didn't know which was more impressive, the scythe rifle hybrid that he's never seen before, or the young girl wielding it and giving orders to him. I don't know what those things are, but you seem to know how to fight them more than me, Sarge said. So I'll leave this to you. Make sure you kill some for me and your fellow Reds. He then headed towards blue base. Ruby just smiled. You got it. She pulled her scythe from the ground and faced the oncoming Grimm. The Grimm's path however, were blocked by several explosive blasts. Ruby turned to the direction of the shots and saw Yang, Weiss, and Blake approaching her. Guys, Ruby said in relief at seeing her teammates. Don't start the party without us, Yang said. What about Church and the others? Ruby asked. They're safe for now, Blake said. The Grimm aren't going after them right now. That's because we've lured them all to us, Weiss pointed out. Ruby saw that she was right. The Grimm were now converging around them. I'm assuming you have a plan of attack, Weiss inquired. Here's my plan, Yang said. We attack. Of course that would be your plan, Weiss said, unamused. She not wrong, Blake said. Just focus on taking them all out and keeping the Reds and Blues safe, Ruby said. Got it, Yang said. Blake nodded. Weiss just sighed, just try not get ourselves killed. The three of them headed towards the large group of Grimm, luring several of them away and dividing the Grimm into 4 groups. Ruby smirked as her teammates left. She then turned to the Grimm, which were comprised of Beowulfs. Let's do this then. Ruby twirled Crescent Rose and pointed it towards the oncoming attackers. She used her semblance and dashed forward, stopping in the middle of the pack of Beowulfs. She then spun around, her scythe slicing the Beowulfs closest to her, and creating an open area around her. The Beowulfs charged at Ruby, but Ruby began to fire several shots from the rifle, shooting the Grimm surrounding her while simultaneously using the recoil to make swift slices from her scythe to the Grimm that got close to her and slicing them apart. 2 Beowulfs attacked Ruby from opposite sides, but she countered by firing a shot at the Beowulf's head in front of her, using the recoil to propel herself backward. As she flew backwards, she hooked her scythe around the second Beowulf's neck and landed on top of it. She fired another shot to the ground, the recoil beheading the Beowulf and sending her flying up into the air. In the air, Ruby saw that there were only a few Grimm left around her. She decided it was time to end this. When she stopped rising, she detached the magazine from Crescent Rose and replaced it with a Fire Dust magazine. As she began her descent, several Beowulfs jumped in the air. Ruby pointed the muzzle of the rifle behind her and fired, releasing a blast of fire, which propelled her down faster. She then spun around in the air, slicing the Beowulfs. Before she reached the ground, she fired another shot, shooting a blaze of fire at the Beowulfs behind her, the recoil pushing her forward and she sliced her way through all the remaining Beowulfs in front of her. Ruby landed on the ground and turned around to see the Beowulfs all on the ground and dead, several of which were already starting to evaporate. Ruby sighed in relief as she finished. "I hope the others are doing fine." As Weiss ran, she turned to see the Grimm, comprised of Beowulfs and Ursa. She lured away, beginning to catch up to her. Seeing that she created enough distance from her teammates, she stopped running and turned to face them. She then stabbed Myrtanaster into the ground and released a sheet of ice towards the Grimm. This caused the Grimm to slip from running and began to lose balance. She then created a straight line of glyphs that were aimed towards the unbalanced Grimm. She began to run through the glyphs, which allowed her to skate through them at high speed. She started to slash away at the Grimm, cutting them apart. She soon stopped running and saw several Beowulfs jump towards her. Weiss created a glyph as a barrier in front of her, stopping the Beowulfs' attack and knocking them back. She then saw several Ursai heading in her direction and the collapsed Beowulfs beginning to recover. Weiss then turns the revolver in Myrtanaster to the red dust. She then created another glyph, which she then used to push the Beowulfs away from her as she turned to the approaching Ursai. She then slashed her rapier at their direction, sending a wave of fire towards them, which burned several Ursa and enforcing the rest to back away. Weiss turned her attention back to the Beowulfs and the remaining Ursai who began to surround her. Weiss began to create a glyph on the ground, the Grimm around her standing within the glyph. She then stabbed her rapier in the ground and pulled the trigger, releasing ice dust into her blade. The ground began to sprout many ice crystals, piercing all the Grimm in the glyph. Weiss removed her rapier from the ground, the glyph disappearing. She saw that all the Grimm around her were now dead. Weiss gave a satisfied smile at her work. Once Blake saw she was far enough, she decided to fight back. She faced the Grimm, comprised of Beowulfs, and pulled out Gamble's shroud, turning it into its gun form and began to fire at them. Some of them went down, but most of the approaching Grimm began to get closer. Blake turned Gamble's shroud back into its katana form and raised both it and her sheath. She then rushed forward, rapidly slashing her way through her attackers. She began to use her semblance, creating clones that she used to dodge the attacks, and propelling herself forward to continue her attacks. As she impaled the Beowulf behind her, she threw her sheath, killing another one running in front. Blake then saw the Beowulfs beginning to surround her and lunged at her together. However, the Blake they attacked was another clone, which disappeared when they made contact, resulting in the Beowulfs' heads colliding with each other. Blake, who had jumped in the air, aimed her gun at the clustered Grimm and fired, shooting them all down. Blake landed on her feet and walked towards the dead Grimm, removing her sheath from its body. As she looked to see the Grimm around her dead, she sheathed her katana, her fight finished. As Yang continued to run, she turned around to see several Ursai continuing their pursuit. Once she was far enough, she decided to go on the offensive. Yang leapt into the air, heading back towards the Grimm. Using Ember Celica, she punched the ground, causing a shock wave and sending several of the Grimm tumbling back. Yang slowly got back up, cocking her gauntlet and ejecting a used shotgun shell from it. She then proceeded to deliver several punches to the Ursai in front of her, each punch releasing an explosive flash and sending them far back. Tu Sai ran towards Yang from her sides, raising their claws to attack. Yang fired a shot from her gauntlet, using the recoil to push her back and avoid the attack, causing the Tu Sai to collide with each other. As she moved back, she delivered a kick to an Ursa behind her, while simultaneously delivering an uppercut to another. Yang looked around her, seeing the Ursai recovering and approaching her. Yang jumped into the air again, this time punching the ground with both her fists. The shock wave began to crack the ground, causing the oncoming Ursai to fly up into the air. Yang then ejected all the shells from both gauntlets of Ember Celica and loaded 2 new chains of red-colored ammo. She then began firing several long-range shots at the airborne Ursai, hitting each of them. Each Ursai dropped to the ground, dead. Yang exhaled. Now, gotta check on the others. Team RWBY soon regrouped back at Blue Base. Once they did, they saw the Reds and Blues just staring at them. Guys. Ruby said, seeing that the Reds and Blues were not saying anything and just looked at them weirdly. Are you okay? Yang asked. That, Griff finally spoke. Was fucking awesome. Really? Church said, incredulous. We saw 4 girls kill a bunch of monsters with some insane weapons, and that's the first thing you say. But it was awesome, Griff said again. Hell yeah it was. Tucker said. I mean that side gun thing was just freaking great to see. You were all like, whoosh, and then, blam, and then like, swish. Ruby smiled at the compliment. Thanks. Stop it, Church said to Tucker. He then turned to Team RWBY. Now, we have a lot more questions to ask you. Exactly, Sarge said. Starting with how we could acquire some weapons like that, specifically if there's any way to incorporate a shotgun on my person, like the little missy over there with her gauntlets. Oh actually, Yang said. I had them. No, not those questions, Church said. Let's start with the questions about what the hell those things were, and how you were able to kill them. Team RWBY looked at each other and nodded in agreement. If you must know, Weiss said. Those monsters are called Grimm. They're creatures that inhabit our world and feed on negative emotion. So these monsters just roam around your world, and that's normal for you. Simmons said, shocked. It's not like we don't do anything about it, Blake said. There are schools that train people to become hunters and huntresses to fight against Grimm and protect people. A school where you get to use kick-ass weapons and kill monsters. Sarge said. Sounds like a school I'd attend. So, wait a minute, Church said. You're telling us that the 4 of you are highly trained fighters and you fight monsters on a daily basis. That's one way to sum it up, Yang said. And you didn't think to tell us this when you first showed up. Church exclaimed, freaking out. We didn't exactly know where we ended up, Weiss said. It was a safer option to keep our skills a secret until we knew who you were. Plus, you know, we didn't want to freak you out, Ruby added. Right, because telling people that you have inhuman fighting moves and kill monsters on a daily basis would freak them out more than actually killing monsters with inhuman fighting moves in front of said people, Church said sarcastically. HMPH, Weiss said, crossing her arms. Well if you're going to act like this, maybe we shouldn't have saved you. Blake elbowed Weiss. You don't mean that. Sorry, that's just Church's way for processing weird shit, Tucker said. By being an asshole. Isn't he like that all the time, Griff said. Yeah, but when you've been with Church long enough, you learn to tell the different levels of being an asshole, Tucker explained. Okay, enough with the asshole talk, Church said. Look, we should all be glad that we're alive and together, Blake said. Wait a second, Ruby said. Where's Caboose? At that moment, they all began to hear yelling and saw Caboose still running around the canyon. Should we stop him? Yang asked. Nah, Tucker said. He'll calm down by himself after a while. Have we answered your questions to an adequate extent? Weiss asked. Church groaned a bit. Yeah, I guess. Let's just be glad that we were able to take out all of the Grimm, Blake said. I feel really exhausted, more so than usual. I think our aura isn't replenishing as fast as it normally does, Weiss stated. What's aura? Griff asked. In our world, aura is the manifestation of our soul, which gives us different abilities, Blake explained. You mean like how Ruby is super fast and when you make those clone things, Simmons said. Yup, Ruby said. Is that why you're so freaking strong? Griff asked Yang. Nope, that's all me, Yang said smiling. So, without this aura, you're basically just 4 girls carrying around weapons. Tex stated. I wouldn't put it like that, but without our aura, we would be more vulnerable in combat, Weiss said. Well, it's a good thing we don't have to deal with any more of those Grimm, Church said. In that moment, they began to hear several sparking noises. They all turned to see sparks flying from the teleporter. The teleporter glowed white once again and there was another bright flash of light. Suddenly, they all saw that across them, the canyon was full of Grimm once again. There were more Beowulfs again, but there was also the addition of several Borbatusks. Are you happy that you opened your mouth? Tex said. Shut up, Church said. Guys, what are we going to do? Ruby asked. The aura we have won't be enough to fight this many Grimm again, Weiss said. And we don't exactly have enough dust with us, Yang added. That's not true, Blake said. The bullhead we crashed in has a lot of dust and dust bullets we can use. Okay, but that still doesn't address the issue of how we can fight these Grimm with just the 4 of us, Weiss said. Well, it's not just the 4 of us here, Blake said. They all looked at the Reds and Blues, who were freaking out once again at the numerous amount of Grimm. Weiss scoffed. Their weapons can't even hurt Grimm, how would they help? Weiss stopped mid-sentence once she realized what the implication that they were getting at. No. Weiss, Blake said. No, Weiss repeated. We are not giving highly sensitive and dangerous resources to 2 armies that already have issues dealing with their own weapons. Do you have a better suggestion? Yang asked. Because at this rate, we'll all be dead in a few minutes. Weiss tried to retort, but said nothing, knowing that they were right. She groaned and turned to the Reds and Blues. All right, all of you listen, Weiss said, getting their attention. We'll need your help to beat these Grimm. Did you forget the part where our weapons don't work on them, Simmons reminded. Plus, there's also the fact that we suck, Griff added. Look at it this way, Yang said. If you don't help us now, we'll probably be killed and they'll turn their attention to you. There was a moment of silence between the Reds and Blues. So, Sarge said, how do we fix our weapon problem? There are some dust ammunition back in our ship, Ruby said. If you use those, it should work against the Grimm. There are dozens of those things between us and your ship, Church pointed out. How the hell do you expect us to get that dust? 3 of us will draw the Grimm's attention, Blake explained. While the other one will keep you safe and bring you to the ship. Which will be me, Weiss said. Her teammates gave her surprised looks at her volunteering. Well, don't look so surprised. If need be, I can create defensive glyphs while we're on the move. I'm the perfect choice to bring them. She has a point, Ruby admitted. Fine then, Blake said. Weiss will bring you to the ship. Ruby, Yang, and I will divert the Grimm away from you. I helping you, Tex said. Tex, you can't, Church said. There's no way they can distract those things with just the 3 of them, and I'm the best fighter we have around here, Tex said. I can help them while you idiots get some firepower. And I'm coming with you, Sarge said. What? Simmons and Griff said in surprise. Sarge, you saw that your weapon had no effect on them, Ruby reminded him. Ruby, it don't matter if I can't kill them or not, Sarge said. But the way I see it is that you need help to keep us all alive. If I need to get roughed up a bit for that to happen, then I'm on board for it. Tex, Sarge, Ruby began to say. You can't. Let them help, Yang said. What? Both Ruby and Church yelled. We do need the help, and we can watch their backs if we need to, Yang said. Plus, I like their spunk. You heard her, Sarge said. So let's do this. Ruby sighed in resignation. Fine. They all heard several howls and grunts as saw that the Grimm noticed their presence. We need to move now, Weiss said. Move it boys. Weiss, Church, Tucker, Griff, and Simmons began to make their way towards the bullhead. Let's kick some ass, Sarge said as he held up his shotgun. You might want to use these, Yang gave Sarge a chain of her dust ammunition. Pretty sure these can work with your shotgun. Sarge removed one of the shells and placed it into his shotgun. He then cocked it, the shell fitting in the weapon. Let's go kill these bastards. Blake walked up to Tex and held up her sheath of Gamble Shroud. It's not much, but you could use a weapon too. Tex took the sheath and looked at it. I can make this work. They all then faced the oncoming Grimm, their weapons raised. Here we go, Ruby said. They then charged forward. Chapter 10. Blood Gulch Brawl. As she left with the reds and blues, and they made their way to the bullhead, there were already several Grimm heading in their direction. The best strategy to deal with this was to run towards the bullhead as fast as they could while avoiding the Grimm. This would go faster if the reds and blues would pick up their pace. "Hurry up, will you?" Weiss shouted. Behind her, Church, Tucker, Griff, and Simmons were running, though not as fast as Weiss would like. "Hey, we're moving as fast as we can," Tucker shouted. "Yeah, it's not exactly easy to run to a ship while avoiding monsters that want to kill us," Griff said. "You wouldn't run to anything unless it was straight to a buffet table," Simmons said. "Less talking, more trying to stay alive," Church shouted. Weiss just shook her head. She was starting to regret volunteering to protect them. As several Beowulfs were about to reach them, Weiss began slow down her pace, staying in the back of the group. "What are you doing?" Church asked. "Keeping us alive," Weiss said. She then created several glyphs, blocking the Beowulfs with the barriers that were created. "That should buy us some time. Now keep running." However, Weiss was prevented from running any further when she bumped into Simmons' back. "What are you doing? We need to keep heading to the ship," Church said, pointing forward. Weiss immediately saw that they were finally in front of the crashed bullhead. "Well, at least we don't have to keep running anymore," Tucker said. "Thank God," Griff said, panting. "I've never run this much in my life." "You've never run at all," Simmons said. "Let's just get in," Weiss said, interrupting any more chatter from them. The five of them proceeded inside the bullhead, which was stocked with several crates. Once inside, Weiss made her way to one of the crates and opened it. She then pulled out a magazine of dust ammunition. "Here," Weiss said as she tossed several magazines, which was caught by Church and the rest. "Use these." Simmons removed the ammunition from the magazine and loaded several into his rifle. "Wow," Simmons said. "They fit perfectly. Huh. Bullets from another universe are just somehow compatible with our weapons," Tucker said. "What a coincidence." He then got some ammunition as well and began loading it into his rifle. "Are you sure these are gonna work?" Griff asked, loading his rifle as well. "They're basic dust rounds," Weiss explained. "They should be enough to kill a Grimm. Though that strategy might only be effective if you were facing a single Grimm." "So, you're saying that these things can't actually kill Grimm," Church clarified. "Not on its own, no," Weiss replied. Wait, Church said. "What's the point of giving us these if they can't even kill a Grimm?" Weiss sighed, irritated that she needed to explain. "You are going to provide suppression fire. My team and I will be fighting the Grimm head-on while the rest of you will give us support by shooting at them. Understand?" They were giving her looks and murmuring that made Weiss believe that they understood very little, which didn't surprise her at all. "You shoot at the Grimm from far away and weaken it, while the four of us will take care of everything else," Weiss reiterated. "Oh," they all said, apparently understanding that explanation. Suddenly, there was a loud thud and the ship began to shake violently. "What the hell was that?" Griff yelled. The continued thuds made them quickly get out of Bullhead and saw what was happening. Ramming on the side of the Bullhead were several Borbatusks. "What do we do?" Griff said, panicking. "We start shooting them, what do you think?" Simmons said. "Open fire," Church said. "Wait," Weiss said, knowing that their weapons won't be effective against these types of Grimm. "These won't." The rest of her words were cut off as they began to fire at the Grimm. The Borbatusks were not slowing down in their charge, the bullets bouncing off their heavily armored body. "I thought you said these bullets could work on them now," Tucker shouted. "Not when you're facing Grimm with an armored plating," Weiss said. She got between them and the Borbatusks, creating several protective glyphs, which caused the Borbatusks to slam into the solid barriers and fall onto their backs. In one swift movement, Weiss repeatedly slashed each overturned Grimm with her rapier, killing them. "That," Weiss said, as she turned back to Church and the others, "is how you handle these types of Grimm." Suddenly, Weiss felt a little faint. She was about to collapse before Tucker quickly caught her. "Hey, you okay?" Tucker asked. "Yeah, you look a little pale," Simmons said. "I mean paler than your usual shade of pale." "I'm fine," Weiss said. "Just a little woozy." Weiss could feel that her aura had been drained considerably, much more than it should have from the limited uses of her semblance. Maybe being in a different universe may affect their use of aura as well as taking it longer to recover it. "Come on," Weiss said, standing back up. We need to get back to the others. Weiss knew that they needed to hurry back. If her aura was this drained, she was worried how the rest of her teammates were faring. After they began their assault on the Grimm, Ruby and her team divided into 3 groups. Blake, Tex, Young, and Sarge were taking care of a mix of Beowulfs and Borbatusks, while Ruby handled a small number of Beowulfs on her own. While this wouldn't be a problem for Ruby, Blake, and Young, they could all feel their aura was severely drained after their first fight. If it were just the 3 of them, they wouldn't be able to defeat all these Grimm themselves. Luckily, they had some backup. As Ruby sliced her way through the Beowulfs, she saw that Tex and Sarge were doing surprisingly well in their fights. In the battle with Blake and Tex, Blake used the gun form of Gamble Shroud and threw the blade across several Beowulfs, using the recoil to pull the blade back and slicing the Grimm from behind. Tex was using Gamble Shroud's sheath to combat against the Borbatusks. Normally, the Borbatusks' plating over their body makes it difficult to injure them, but Tex's strikes were so strong that every swing she delivered on the Grimm's body actually caused the armor to begin to crack. "Blake, heads up," Tex yelled. Swinging the sheath, she hit a Borbatusk that was rolling towards her. The blow knocked the Grimm into the air towards Blake. Blake then used her sickle to wrap around the incoming Borbatusk. Pulling the trigger of the gun, the recoil pushed the Borbatusk towards several Beowulfs, knocking them to the ground. Blake continued to use the makeshift flail to knock down more Grimm around her. Once she finished, she released the Borbatusk above her while she turned her weapon back into a katana. Raising her blade, Blake stabbed the falling Borbatusk under its stomach. Blake also saw that Tex was finishing up as well, having ripped a Borbatusk's tusk off and used it as a makeshift blade to stab several Beowulfs, while using the sheath to bash away other Borbatusks. Once Tex finished, she made her way to Blake. "Can I keep this?" she asked regarding Blake's sheath. "I think you could use less weapons," Blake said, taking her sheath back. "Woohoo!" Sarge yelled in joyous glee. "Eat dust dirtbags." Sarge cocked his shotgun and fired several blasts, releasing long-range shots and blasting back the Beowulfs. However, his continuous firing resulted in the quick consumption of the dust that Young gave him. "Young, I think I might need a few more ammunition." "Just a sec," Young said as she stopped a Borbatusk from ramming at her by grabbing it by its tusks. She then lifted up the Grimm and rolled it like a bowling ball towards other Borbatusks. She then jumped into the air and fired several long-range shots at the Grimm approaching Sarge. She then landed beside Sarge. "Sup, you okay?" "Okay. I've never felt more alive at facing possible certain death," Sarge said. Young just grinned and gave Sarge another round. "This is the last one I have on me. Make your shots count." "You got it," Sarge said as he loaded a shell and cocked his gun. Young faced the Grimm and charged forward with a punch, with Sarge firing from behind. Ruby cut down the last Beowulf in front of her and exhaled. Without using her semblance and using her aura to protect herself, she was getting really tired from fighting this long. Ruby turned to see Blake, Tex, Young, and Sarge heading towards her. "You okay, sis?" Young asked. "I'll be fine," Ruby said, panting. "Just a little exhausted." "We're all exhausted," Blake said. "Well, I don't know about you, but I feel great," Sarge said. "I feel that these things can't scratch me." "That's because you're wearing armor," Tex pointed out. "They're not." The sounds of growling turned their attention to the still many remaining Grimm that were approaching them. "Shit," Tex said. "How long do we have to keep stalling?" Several shots were suddenly fired from the side, hitting several Grimm and driving them back. Ruby and the others turned to the direction of the shots and saw Church, Tucker, Griff, and Simmons, who were firing at the Grimm. Behind them was Weiss, who was carrying Bag with her and heading towards the direction of Ruby's group. "Weiss!" Ruby shouted in joy at seeing her partner. She then rushed to give Weiss a hug. "No," Weiss said, stopping Ruby inches from her. "Here." She pulled out a magazine of dust and tossed it to Ruby. "I'm assuming you need the extra help." "Yes we do," Young said as she rifled through the bag and pulled out 2 rounds of dust, loading them. Blake, Tex, and Sarge did the same. "Hey guys," Simmons said as he and the rest of the group headed to them after driving the Grimm away. "You okay?" "Simmons, what took you so long to get here?" Sarge shouted. "We almost died out here." "Sorry sir," Simmons said. "Thank you for your clear observation of my failure." It won't happen again. You can kiss my ass later, Sarge said. We got some monsters to kill. Guys, Tucker said. The Grimm aren't paying attention to us anymore. They all noticed that the Grimm were heading to another direction of the canyon. Where are they going? Weiss wondered. Grimm are attracted to negative emotions, Blake said. Maybe they're being drawn by something else. What else is in this canyon that would have negative emotions to draw all those? Church stopped speaking mid-sentence. Oh no. Ruby realized as well who Church was thinking of. The only person out in the canyon who would have negative emotions at this point. Someone who was not with them and was still screaming and running around. Caboose. At that moment, they could hear Caboose's faint screams from across the canyon. Well, shit, Griff said. I guess it was nice knowing the blue fella, Sarge said. He'll be in our memories as he gets torn apart and eaten. We are not letting him get eaten, Blake said. I can get to him, Ruby said. I can use my semblance and grab him before the Grimm do. Ruby, your aura is practically drained, Weiss said. It's too risky. Then what can we do? Ruby asked. Hey. They all turned to see Tex riding the motorcycle that the Blues had gotten from the Reds. I'll take care of Caboose, Tex said. I'm coming with you, Blake said. Ruby nodded, agreeing with Blake's volunteering. She then turned to the others. We'll catch up with them. When they get Caboose and head back, there'll probably be some Grimm chasing them. Our only option then would be to fight. This has got to be one of your worst ideas ever, Weiss said. Yet we're gonna follow it anyway, Young said. Okay, let's move, Church said. Blake headed to Tex and the motorcycle. You know this thing isn't exactly a two-seater, Tex pointed out. I can manage, Blake said. She pulled out Gamble's shroud in its gun form and, using the ribbon of the weapon, wrapped it around the side of the vehicle as she jumped on top of it. The two of them then headed in the direction of Caboose's screams and the converging Grimm. Alright, let's follow, Ruby said. However, before they could follow the speeding vehicle, they began to hear several sparks in the other direction. They looked to see the teleporter continuing to spark. Oh god, not again, Church said, seeing the erratic machine. We need to get that device under control, Weiss said. Before we have to deal with more Grimm. Okay, change of plans, Ruby said. Simmons, Weiss, and Griff will handle shutting down the teleporter. Church, Tucker, Sarge, Young, and I will give backup to Blake and Tex. Hey, why do I get stuck with Nerdzilla and the Ice Queen? Griff protested. Hey, Simmons and Weiss said angrily. Oh, are you volunteering to risk your life against a horde of monsters? Young asked. Griff was silent for several seconds before he spoke. Okay, guys, let's go shut down that teleporter. He then headed towards the machine. Both Simmons and Weiss just shook their heads and followed him. Works every time, Young said. Okay, now let's go, Ruby said. She and her group then headed to the Grimm. As Tex and Blake got closer to the Grimm, they saw that the Grimm were circling around Caboose, who was just running around in a circle while continuing to scream. Are you ready? Tex asked Blake. Ready, Blake said, removing the wrapped Gamble shroud from the motorcycle as she slowly began to stand up. With a strong amount of force, Tex hit the brakes on the motorcycle and stopped abruptly, launching Blake into the air. Mid-air, Blake threw Gamble's shroud towards Caboose. She then pulled the ribbon and fired a shot from it, causing it to wrap around Caboose, who soon stopped running as he was wrapped up. Blake began to pull the trigger several times, the recoil causing Caboose to be pulled into the air as well. Eventually, the two of them collided with each other, and began to fall. Oh hello, Caboose said calmly, as if not understanding the situation they were in. Caboose, Blake said as she saw that they getting close to the ground. Hold on. Blake used her semblance on them both, using it to dash forward as they landed on the ground in a mild thud. Oh my god, that was amazing. Caboose said in excitement. Let's go again. Maybe, another time, Blake said, her aura drained further from using her semblance. Hey, Tex said, having caught up to their position and stopping the motorcycle. You alright? Oh, we are just fine, Caboose said as he and Blake standing up. Oh look, the friends who were making a circle around me are coming this way. Blake and Tex saw the Grimm heading their direction. We need to go now, Blake said. This thing won't move as fast with 3 people on it, Tex said, indicating the motorcycle. Blake knew that Tex was right. Then we stand our ground. Tex groaned as she stepped off her vehicle. Caboose, here. She then gave him a rifle that was loaded with dust ammunition. Oh no, that's fine, Caboose said. I already have a weapon. Yes, but this one is special, Tex said, trying to be patient with Caboose's slow uptake. Oh, people have called me special, Caboose said. Is that made for me? Quote. Sure, Tex said, deciding to go with whatever helps Caboose understand. Caboose excitedly took the weapon from Tex. So, now what? Several gunshots were fired from behind them, hitting the approaching Grimm. They all turned to see Ruby and the others arrive, continuously firing at the Grimm. Blake, Young yelled, seeing her partner looking very tired. I'll be fine, Blake said, with clear fatigue. Just step back, little lady, Sarge said, cocking his shotgun. We got this. He continued firing at the Grimm. He's right, Blake, Ruby said. You rest right now. Yeah, Young said. We'll handle these rejects. She then charged forward and began to deliver several punches to some Beowulfs, the explosive blasts sending them back and knocking other Grimm down. Blake nodded at Ruby, who went to join the battle. Weiss, Simmons, and Griff had arrived to the site of the teleporter, and things were not looking good. The teleporter was now sparking out of control, releasing small electrical bursts which prevented them from getting close. From what I can see, the machine is starting to overexert the energy from the dust core, Simmons said. If we don't shut it down now, it could cause an explosion that can wipe out everything in the canyon. How exactly are we going to stop this thing? Weiss asked. If we can get close enough to disable the wires connecting at the base and the dust core, it should switch itself off, Simmons explained. If we can get close. Suddenly, the teleporter shot out a surge of electricity, which was heading at their direction. Duck, Simmons shouted. The three of them quickly dropped to the ground, avoiding the stream of electricity. They saw the electricity impact to a rock behind them, which had exploded into rubble. Yeah, I vote a no on getting close to that thing, Griff said. The teleporter was making even louder sparking noises. The three of them saw the teleporter beginning to glow white. Oh no, Weiss said. It's going to bring about more Grimm. We need to shut it down now. How are we going to do that without getting fried? Griff asked. If we can't switch it off, we destroy it, Weiss said, pulling out Mertonaster. Again, how are we going to do that without getting fried? Griff repeated. Weiss responded by creating a glyph in front of them. Fire your weapons through here. But if we destroy it, it might blow up anyway. Simmons pointed out. If we don't, we'll be dealing with too many Grimm and we'll still be dead anyway. Weiss said. Shoot now. Fuck this. Griff aimed his rifle at the teleporter and fired through the glyph. Griff, Simmons shouted. However, it was too late now, so he followed Griff's lead and fired several shots through the glyph as well. As the bullets passed through the glyph, they became red streaks of energy. The blasts made their way to the teleporter, but not before the machine glowed bright white once again, causing another bright flash of light. The blasts then hit the teleporter directly, which resulted in a large fiery explosion that blew the three of them back. Are we dead? Simmons asked. I'd like to say yes just for this nightmare of my life to be over, Griff groaned. But the pain I feel in every part of my body says otherwise. Weiss pulled herself back up on her feet. Get up, you idiots. There was a flash of light before the teleporter was destroyed. There could be more Grimm around. This is not the time to lay on your backs. Yes sir, Simmons said, getting back on his feet. I mean ma'am. It's like Sarge isn't even gone, Griff muttered as he got back up. The three of them looked around them and the only Grimm they saw were the ones that Ruby and the others were fighting at the moment. Maybe we got lucky and the teleporter didn't send anything here, Simmons suggested. Right, because we're that lucky, Griff said, highly doubtful. As if on cue, the three of them heard a loud screech and looked up into the air. Well, that's not good, Simmons said. No shit, Griff said. We need to get back to Ruby, Weiss said, the lives of everyone here in even greater danger. The bright flash of light covered the entire canyon, causing Ruby, Church, and the others to stop fighting and cover their eyes. Ruby, behind you. Ruby uncovered her eyes and looked behind her to see a Beowulf in the air, its claws outstretched and ready to slash Ruby. The flash of light distracted Ruby and let her guard down. Ruby tried to turn Crescent Rose to attack, but without using her semblance, she was too slow and she knew it. However, before the Beowulf's claws could connect, its claw was shot, knocking the Grimm down. RWBY turned to see Tucker, his rifle pointed at the knocked down Grimm. "Back off, ugly," Tucker said. The Beowulf got back up and charged towards Tucker. Tucker tried to fire, but no shots came out, meaning he was out of ammo. "Tucker, get out of the way," RWBY shouted. Tucker was panicking and not moving at all as the Beowulf pounced. In a split second, Tucker pulled out his energy sword and thrust it forward, stabbing the Beowulf through its chest, killing it. Tucker quickly pulled the sword out of the dead Grimm. He then saw RWBY heading his way. "Tucker, oh my god," RWBY shouted in relief. She then turned her attention to energy sword. "What is that?" "Oh, you mean my sword," Tucker said, raising it up for RWBY to get a clearer look. "Pretty badass, am I right? I can't believe this thing works on them. I just pulled it out cause I was panicking. This sword is amazing," RWBY said in awe. She had never seen any weapon like this back in Remnant. "Well, I have been told by the ladies that I have a pretty amazing sword," Tucker said. "Bo chicka bo whoa." Tucker pulled RWBY out of the way as he slashed another Beowulf that tried to attack. He then stabbed it through the head and it dropped to the ground. "You might wanna work on staying focused," Tucker said. "Right," RWBY said, embarrassed. Suddenly, they all heard a large screech that echoed throughout the canyon. "What the hell was that?" Sarge said. "Guys," Blake said as she looked up. They all followed her and looked up as well and their eyes widened at what they saw. It was a giant black bird Grimm, a white mask covering its face and its massive wings spread wide. RWBY, Blake, and Young recognized it as a Nevermore. "It's official," Church said. "I hate your world." "Oh, a birdie," Caboose shouted in surprise and excitement. "Guys." They all stopped looking up and turned to see Weiss, Simmons, and Griff heading their way. "There's a giant Grimm in the sky," Simmons said frantically. "No shit," Sarge shouted. "Yeah dude, it's not exactly hard to miss," Tucker said. "Hey, we ran all this way to warn you, the least you could do is be a little grateful," Griff said. "Warn us," Church said incredulously. "You got here 10 seconds after we saw that thing. That's not a warning, that's yesterday's news." "Guys, focus," Yang said. "Yang's right," Tex said. "We need to think of a way to kill that thing soon before it decides to fly out of here. Killing it is one thing, but we can't even reach it," Weiss said. "We need to lure it down here." Oh, I have an idea," Caboose said. "We could bring the birdie down with food. Does anyone have bird seeds lying around?" "On next plan," Church said quickly. Before they could say anything else, the Nevermore screeched once again before it began to flap its wings, shooting spear-sized feathers at them. "Scatter," RWBY shouted. Everyone did just that and began to run to avoid the feathers, which crashed to the ground, impaling some Grimm who weren't too quick. "Eat this bird brain," Sarge shouted as he raised his shotgun. He then fired a shot, which wasn't even close to reaching the flying Grimm. The Nevermore shot out more feathers, aiming at Sarge's direction. "Sarge, move," Yang shouted as she tackled him, pushing them both out of the way of the attack. "Darn it, I almost had it," Sarge grumbled on the ground. "Sure you did," Yang said sarcastically. "Keep moving," Tex shouted. RWBY looked at the scene and knew that running around and dodging wasn't going to do much good. "We need to take that thing down," RWBY said. "Unless you can fly, we can't exactly do that," Tucker said. RWBY then came up with an idea that may be able to stop the Nevermore. "Everyone listen up," RWBY shouted, getting everyone's attention. "I have an idea. If it means I can stop running, then I'm in," Griff said. "Weiss," RWBY turned to her partner. "Do you still have enough aura to make glyphs?" "Just barely, but I can manage," Weiss said. "Why?" "We're doing the same thing we did during our initiation," RWBY said. "What?" Weiss, Blake, and Yang shouted, not liking the idea at all. "RWBY, you know that's a crazy idea," Blake said. "We're too weakened in this universe and your aura may already be out." "It's the only way we can reach that Grimm," RWBY said. "If we don't, we're all dead." Yang sighed. "Be careful." RWBY nodded. She then turned to the reds and blues. "All right, guys. I'm going to need you to draw that thing to blue base." "How are we supposed to do that?" Simmons asked. "Well, maybe if we have one of us act as bait," Tex suggested. "Who would be dumb enough to?" Church stopped talking as he and everyone else looked at Caboose. "What?" Caboose said. "Is there something on my helmet?" "Come on Caboose," Church said as he got Caboose and the rest of the soldiers began to follow. "Ruby, if we have to say goodbye here, then I'm glad to have gotten to know a girl as great as you," Tucker said. "Aw, thanks Tucker," Ruby said. "But we won't be saying goodbye now." "What do you mean?" Tucker asked. "You're going to help me in this part of the plan," Ruby said. "Say what now?" From Blue Base, Team RWBY, the Reds, and the Blues observed Caboose's attempt at getting the Nevermore's attention. It was surprisingly easy, as they could see Caboose beginning to run away, with the Nevermore beginning to chase him. "Okay, great work Caboose," Church said through his radio. "Now keep running around until we tell you to come to Blue Base for the plan." "You got that." "AAAAAHHHHHK," Caboose said. He then continued screaming. As Caboose continued stalling, Team RWBY had begun to prepare the same slingshot setup from their initiation. Blake had tied her ribbon between two posts above Blue Base. "You know," Young said as she and Tex pulled the ribbon back as far as they could and held it in place. "I'm starting to regret agreeing to this idea." "I'll be fine," Ruby said. "Ahem," Tucker said beside her. "Right, we'll be fine," Ruby corrected. She turned to Weiss. "Are you sure you're good?" "I've shot you at a Nevermore before," Weiss said. "If I can do that, I can do this. So, yes, I'm good." Yeah, why am I doing this?" Tucker asked. "Because you're the only other person here who has a weapon that can hurt the Grimm," Blake said. "You'll be fine," Young said, patting Tucker in the back. "The only thing you have to worry about is missing and going splat." "Again," Tucker said, sounding even more scared. "Why the fuck am I doing this?" "Don't listen to her," Ruby said as she pulled Tucker and they both stood in front of the ribbon. "Shouldn't we test it out first?" Tucker asked. "We could have Griff try it out," Sarge offered. "No one asked you," Griff said. "No time," Ruby said. "Church, do it." "All right," Church then got back on his radio. "Caboose, you can come this way now." They then saw the Nevermore heading into the direction of Blue Base with Caboose running their way. "Guys," Caboose yelled to the others as he began to get close. "I think the birdie is mad." "Ruby, now would be a good time for your plan," Tex said. "Okay," Ruby said, taking a deep breath. "Tucker, are you ready?" "No," Tucker said as he gripped Ruby's shoulders. "This isn't how I pictured holding a lady. But this is exactly how I pictured what I would do to you," Weiss said with a smirk. "Everyone, get ready," Ruby said. She could see the Nevermore getting closer and she positioned crescent rows behind her, the muzzle of the rifle pointed back. "Now." Young and Tex released their grip on the ribbon, catapulting both Ruby and Tucker into the air. As they soared in the air, Ruby began firing several shots of gravity dust that allowed them to stay in the air and keep their momentum. It took more shots to stay up due to Tucker, who was screaming since they were shot up, adding extra weight, but the two of them were getting close to the Nevermore. "Tucker, your sword," Ruby shouted. Despite his screams, Tucker heard her and pulled out the energy blade. As the two went above the Nevermore, Ruby embedded crescent rows to the Grimm's back, allowing them to stop and land on top of the Grimm. "What now?" Tucker asked, finally having stopped screaming. Ruby pulled out crescent rows from the Nevermore's back and held it up. "We start cutting." She then stabbed her scythe on the Grimm again and began to run towards a wing, slicing the Grimm as it did. "This is the worst plan ever," Tucker said. He then stabbed his sword on the Nevermore as well and began to run to the other wing. As they sliced their way around the Nevermore's back, the Grimm began to shriek and shake violently, flapping its wings and trying to get rid of Ruby and Tucker. However, the two wouldn't fall, their weapons keeping them firmly gripped to the Nevermore. "Let's end this," Ruby said. She and Tucker then made their way to the Nevermore's head. They raised their weapons and stabbed at the Grimm's neck. They then ran across each other, effectively cutting through its neck, and decapitating it. The Nevermore's head fell as its body soon followed. "How do we, Tucker said as they began to fall. "Not go splat. If Weiss, aura is still good, then we'll be fine," Ruby said. "I hope." The two of them saw that they were getting closer to the ground. "We're gonna go splat." Tucker panicked. "Come on Weiss," Ruby said. Suddenly, several glyphs appeared in a spiral form below them. A wave of ice then shaped around the glyphs, forming a spiral. Ruby and Tucker landed on the ice and they began to go down the ice spiral like a slide until they eventually ended in the ground, perfectly safe. The two of them stood up and saw Weiss standing in front of them, with the others heading their way. "I told you I was good," Weiss said. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Ruby said. "I'm actually more worried about Tucker." She saw Tucker still dazed from the landing and probably traumatized over the entire experience. "If you ask me, a near brush with death would help improve his manners," Weiss said, enjoying Tucker's suffering. "If that means he talks less, then I agree," Church said. "Please tell me that's all of them," Griff said. "I'm pretty sure the Nevermore was the last one," Blake said. "So guys," Simmons said. "What do we do with this thing?" He was referring to the corpse of the Nevermore that was in the middle of the canyon. "Oh, don't worry about that," Yang said. "Grimm bodies disappear after a while." "Really?" Sarge said, walking up to the corpse. "I was thinking of stuffing this thing and putting it in the base as a trophy." "Where would you even put it? It's huge," Griff said. "And besides, I helped kill it," Tucker said. "If anything, it should go to Blue Base." "Are we keeping the birdie?" Caboose asked. "If so, I have a trick I can teach it by whistling." He then attempted to whistle, but made spitting noises instead. "No one is keeping this thing," Tex said. "Well, I refuse to move from this spot and this prize without a proper discussion," Sarge said. He then emphasized his point by stomping his foot in the ground. However, the ground beneath Sarge suddenly gave way, making a hole, which Sarge began to fall in. "Sarge!" Ruby quickly grabbed Sarge by his hand, but it was to no avail. Instead of pulling him out, Ruby fell into the hole with him. "Ruby!" Yang shouted as she saw her sister disappear into the hole. And this the end of part 5 this What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't really leave a comment down below and subscribe to the